What's going on, Tamers? So if you're fans of the channel, you probably have realized that it's been pretty quiet this week as far as uploads are concerned. I'll let you folks know that I've been pretty hard at work doing a ton of stuff behind the scenes. I mailed out all of the BT9, BT10 giveaway winners cards, and if you saw my post on Twitter, it still rings true. I am never going to financially recover from that. Mailing worldwide was a mistake. But again, congrats to the folks who did win, and if you guys do win and you want to show up your stuff, please feel free to tag me on Twitter. I'd be happy to retweet your stuff. Additionally, I've been working on a really cool project that I had hoped would have been released at this point, but unfortunately got pushed back a little bit. But I'm still very, very excited to show that off, but I unfortunately can't say much about it right now, so sorry. But yeah, please look forward to some really cool stuff coming out in the future, and again, I'm really, really hoping you guys like it. But all that to say, episodes should be returning pretty regularly in the coming weeks, so yeah, look out for more Digimon content there. So we are in week 7 of the BT11 Dimensional Phase meta over here in Japan, and last week I said there were going to be 2 more weeks of events before BT12 drops over here, and that was actually a bit of a white lie. Actually less of a lie anymore, I just forgot that in a lot of cases what happens is shops don't run events the week of a release. So for example, next week BT12 will drop, and instead of running events, they usually take that time to prepare the shops and get ready, you know, for release days of those new sets. So next weekend I'll take a look at the results for BT11 events, and if there weren't really that many, then I just won't do one, and we'll focus solely on BT12 content moving forward. That being said though, BT11 has been a wild ride. I've had a ton of fun playing this meta. What I thought was eventually going to be really stale ended up becoming way more diverse than I could have hoped for, and if you've stuck with the game since its original release, then I think I can pretty proudly say that BT11 is my favorite meta so far. Lots of decks, past and present, all seem really viable. Lots of decks have a lot of power, lots of decks have a lot of support, and you can pretty much run whatever you want. Anyway, let's take a look at the results from the past week. Let's also look at some of the big takeaways from the BT11 meta, as well as a few decks that topped over the course of the week. Alright, so taking a look at the week 7 results, if you remember from last week, Ulforce Digimon shot up the ranks to become the new king of the meta. However, that was a short-lived reign as it drops back down with the rest of the pack here, along with BlackWarGreymon X antibody. The new king, though, Shoutmon X7 has risen. Keep in mind that Shoutmon X7 has incorporated a couple copies of Shoutmon X5 into the deck just to speed it up a little bit while you're looking for your X7 pieces. And the other versions of Crossride have really fallen out of favor. Things like just Raw X5, or in some cases like Mervamon X5 or just Mervamon. One of those 3 builds have all kind of just become second-rate Crossride decks at this point. That isn't to say that the deck is bad, however. I mean, it ties with other decks that have reigned over the meta, like BlackWarGreymon X Antibody, Examon, alongside it. Also, for the, I think, 3rd week in a row at this point, Machinedramon has done really well this set. If that's a deck that you're excited for, and with BT12 drops, it's only getting more support, then I really wholeheartedly suggest you grab those Machinedramons and Analog Mans. And a deck that I haven't really talked much about since the inception of the BT11 meta, but it's always kind of just been in the background, is Mastamon here. Mastamon, again, putting up numbers. Yeah, I think the hardest part about this deck is just finding the right build, but I think that some players have finally cracked the code, and we'll take a look at some of those builds when we look at the decks that topped over the past week. Now, if this is in case the last week of the BT11 meta, then I do want to make a couple of points about decks that are strong, and maybe why they're strong. And that is that decks like BlackWarGreymon X Antibody, Examon, and Machinedramon, which these past couple weeks have done incredibly well for themselves, all feature what I would consider raid boss type monsters. Digimon that are really hard to just take down with a single turn. And we see that in the form of protection that each of these decks feature. For example, Machinedramon, you can't minus his DP, and it's really hard to return it to the hand or the field. Also, it's hard to destroy with cards like Chaosdramon. Examon having abilities like Evade to dodge destruction effects, as well as forced attacking every turn from the Slayer Dramon, mean that your board stays under their control for most of the game. And in the case of BlackWarGreymon X Antibody, no D-Digivolve and then no DP minus for the turn before it gets to the boss monster of the deck, and then you being able to give Digimon the ability to ignore option effects is pretty powerful. I think all this culminates in what I consider a might equals right meta, where actually building a huge Digimon is key. One of the reasons I feel like I can confidently say this is because Grandis, a Digimon that could get to 18,000 DP, was king of the meta for some time and was able to take down BlackWarGreymon X Antibody with little problem. So what I would say is, just as a note, that if you're trying to build competitively for this set, make sure you have answers to these situations. Those 3 decks that I just mentioned, again, Machinedramon, Examon, and BlackWarGreymon X Antibody. If your deck can't handle those 3 or keep up with the speed of those decks, then you're going to be in a really rough spot. However, the one thing that I will say is that I feel like all the decks we see featured here have some way around those decks. Again, either the speed or the power of those decks. Again, WarGreymon X Antibody is super fast and also just build a huge Digimon. Bloomlord with Hydramon is super powerful, and Bloomlord can just swing over multiple Digimon when you have tons of rested Digimon on your side of the board. And the list just goes on and on and on. One super cool deck that I saw featured here was Rust Tyrannomon, finally seeing some representation here. The deck unfortunately had no Digimon in it, but Rust Tyrannomon with a Tyrannomon-focused deck was really, really cool to see, and something that I had hoped for since the start of this meta. And then as we take a look at the rest of the decks on the list, you see Marsmon top again using the RiseGreymon package, MetalGreymon X Antibody, always quick and powerful. Minerva Loop, love to see it. If you want to know more about this deck, I did an actual deck profile on it, and I had a ton of fun. Probably my funnest deck to play this entire meta. And then other decks like Venusmon, Gallantmon take another spot here. Sakyamon somehow finds a dub. I'm not really sure how that one worked out, but there it is. And then, yeah, Grandis, the fall from Greats has been crazy. It went from like top spots to almost not even played anymore when folks brought out the Crossheart again. As we look at a couple of decks that have topped over the course of the week, the first one I want to bring up is Shoutmon X7. You can see here, like I said before, they run X7 plus some of the X5 package as well. What I really like about this deck specifically is the inclusion of Ignitemon. You know, the deck only runs 1 copy of X4 just to prepare for the ban list that's coming on December 1st, which isn't too far from now, so the making of this video. But the second best option there outside of X4 is X3. The only difference here is X3 cannot destroy itself the same turn that it attacks. So the idea here is to get your X3s on the board, and then if they swing and aren't destroyed, then you can destroy them with your Ignitemon, and then reform the pieces up under one of your Tamers to be reused as Digicross fodder for another Digimon. Keep in mind that the card here that you probably can't see because of the glare is 4 copies of Sparrowmon, so just, yeah. Japanese card shop's never been great at photography, and that trend continues into BT11, unfortunately. Outside of that, the deck looks pretty straightforward. 1 copy of Shoutmon DX, just as a wild card here, with the Omega Shoutmons, the G Greymons, the 2 new Tamers of Taiki, Kiriha, and Nene. And yeah, the old Crossheart package you've come to know and love thus far. Another deck that we want to take a look at is actually going to be Bloomlord and Hydramon. I know that you folks over there in the English side of the game have just gotten your hands on the EX3 meta, and Hydramon is a force to be reckoned with, aka the Hydrussy you see here. The cool thing about Bloomlord Hydramon is that it does continue to see support well into BT11 in cards like the new Regimon as well as the new Padumon, being able to, at the start of your turn, draw a card and gain a memory. So if they stay around on the board once you've rested them, then you gain some effects off of them and make the deck just that much more powerful. Outside of that, we see a pretty standard build of things like the Ayatarmon, 2 copies of Cherrymon, which I like here, the Blossomon plus the Argomon, and then the rest of the deck is pretty straightforward, I think, from the BT10. Most of this stuff you already have your hands on. You just kind of have to wait for the Vegemon and the Padumon here. Keep in mind that if you are playing that EX3 meta over there on the English side, make sure you get 4 copies of the new EX3 Pomumon. This card is so good. One of the things that I really like about this build is that their Digitama focus on building up your DP rather than for finding cards. Like I said before, this really feels like a might equals right meta, and having the bigger Digimon is actually pretty important. So being able to give your Bloomlord just a little bit more strength that he might need, or your Hydramon to 14k DP is pretty strong and pretty effective in my opinion. You know, even before this meta started, I saw the Tyrannomon support that was coming out in the form of Rust Tyrannomon as well as the Metal Tyrannomon for this set, and I was super excited to build a Tyrannomon focused deck, and I tried it and it failed miserably. But it looks like somebody out there was able to find a deck that was consistent enough to take a victory here in the form of adding Rapidmons here for some destruction and control on the board, as well as the Angoramon for the Tamer support alongside all these new Taigas you got. I will say that the one thing I'm a little wary about this deck is the inclusion of the Chaosdramon. I don't know, he seems a little weird in this build. I feel like Rust Tyrannomon is probably all you're going to need to get over some of the bigger Digimon in the game, considering Rust Tyrannomon's 13k stat line, as well as the inclusion of the Taigas and the rest of the Tyrannomon Digimon, which basically buff of the Digimon if his name is Tyrannomon, and Chaosdramon doesn't have that, obviously. So your Rust Tyrannomon is actually probably going to be bigger than your Chaosdramon in this case. But yeah, interesting build nonetheless. I think that if you are excited to build Rust Tyrannomon, I might start off with a build like this one, and then start to build out from there. Also, shoutouts to the max rarity. I just realized he has, woo, this deck costs a pretty penny. And then the deck that I think that I've given probably the least amount of love to this series, which unfortunately I think deserves more, is going to be Mastamon here. Maybe I'll do a deck profile on this one, but yeah, for the time being here, this deck list features only 3 copies of the Mastamon. They feature a couple copies of Lucemon Fall Down Mode. Look, I know this card is super expensive, so on the English side of the game, if you can only get your hands on one copy of this card, I personally think that one copy is enough for this deck. I think two might be a little bit overkill. Looks like this person went with a more Angemon focused package here, pulling out some of the new Angemon with the old Angemon, and then the Angemon X antibody just for the additional recovery and security attack minus. And then outside of that, the rest of the build seems a little weird to me, but it looks like it worked. Like only 2 copies of the new Devimon, 1 copy of the new Angemon, only 3 copies of the Mirei Tamer that you need for the deck. But yeah, it looks like it seemed to find the dub. Also keep in mind that I'm not sure if you can really see the glare down here, but these are Ordinamon, the level 7 purple-yellow, Dexmon or Death Xmon, 1 copy of this guy, and then 4 copies of Chaos the Great. And so that's going to be it for the Week 7 BT11 Dimensional Phase meta here for the Japanese version of the Digimon card game. And honestly, it might also be it for the BT11 meta as a whole over here in Asia. This has, again, been the funnest meta for me to play in since the game's inception, since I started anyway. And I hope that when you folks in the English side of the game get your hands on it, you have just as much fun, if not more, than I did. I think this is the perfect place to hand off that baton to the English meta for them to carry the game forward. And you know what I thought was going to be just like a BlackWarGreymon X antibody stomping ground for this set ended up being a way more diverse meta than I could have hoped for. So guys, please again, try out as much stuff as you can, play whatever you want, and really enjoy BT11 when it releases over there. Anyway folks, let me know what decks you're excited to play when BT11 drops over the English side of the game. Also, if you have any questions about the decks that I talked about today, feel free to put them down in the comments below. Anyway folks, thanks for watching. I'm going to get out of here. Before you get out of here, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.